The night was calm, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. The stars shone bright above the small human colony on the edge of planet Virion. Most people were sleeping, dreaming of a better life far from war and hunger. But Ethan Cole was still awake, sitting outside his workshop, watching the stars. He was a mechanic and a man who fixed broken machines, but carried a heart more broken than any engine. Ethan had lost everything in the war years ago, his wife, his unborn child, and most of his hope. Now he lived quietly, repairing mining bots and starship engines for anyone who could pay. But that night, the sky changed. A streak of fire cut across the heavens, burning brighter than anything he had ever seen. The ground shook as a thunderous sound tore through the air. People rushed out of their homes, pointing toward the fireball falling from the sky. "It's a ship," someone shouted, and then, boom, a massive explosion lit the night. The blast came from the forest beyond the colony, fire rising like a burning mountain. Most people ran back to safety, but Ethan didn't. Something deep inside him, maybe the same thing that once made him a soldier, told him to go. Without thinking, he grabbed his coat and ran toward the flames. The air was hot and thick with smoke. Trees burned like torches, metal fragments scattered across the ground. He could see what was left of the crashed ship, a small transport. Its hull torn apart, sparks flashed, fuel leaked, and the smell of burning circuits filled the air. Then he heard it, a faint cry, soft, trembling but alive. A child. Ethan froze for a second. A child? Out here in a crash like this? The cry came again from inside the burning wreck. He didn't hesitate, he pushed through the smoke, covering his face with his sleeve. The heat was unbearable, his clothes already catching fire at the edges. Inside the ship, he saw a small metal pod cracked open, and inside it, a little girl no older than 6, her skin faintly glowing silver, her eyes wide with terror. She was trapped under a piece of broken metal. Ethan tried to lift it, but it was too heavy. He looked at his hands, trembling, bleeding. Then he remembered the plasma torch hanging from his belt. He switched it on and began cutting through the metal. Sparks flew into his arms, burning his skin. The heat melted his gloves, but he didn't stop. The girl cried out again, reaching for him with a trembling hand. "Don't move!" he shouted, coughing from the smoke. Finally, the metal gave way and he pulled her free. The ship groaned as explosions rattled through its frame. He ran out, holding the child close behind them. The ship erupted into a wall of fire that threw them both to the ground. Ethan's hands were blistered, charred, the skin blackened and torn. He screamed in pain but didn't let go of her. He wrapped his burned hands around the girl, shielding her from the falling debris. When the fire died down, silence returned. Only the crackle of burning wood remained moments later. Bright lights appeared in the sky, search drones. They scanned the area and focused on Ethan and the girl. A group of armored soldiers descended from the ships. They surrounded him, weapons drawn. One of them shouted, "Step away from the child!" Ethan looked up, confused. "She's hurt. She needs help." But the soldier's tone was cold. "That's not a child," Ethan frowned. "What are you talking about?" The leader stepped forward, his voice mechanical behind the helmet. "She's from the forbidden kind, a species wiped out centuries ago by galactic law." The girl hid behind Ethan, clutching his arm, her eyes glowing softly. "She doesn't look dangerous," Ethan said weakly. "Orders are orders," the soldier replied. "Hand her over." Ethan shook his head, still in shock. He had no reason to protect this strange child, and yet something inside him refused to let go. "She's alive," he said quietly. "I won't let you hurt her." The soldiers raised their weapons, red lights glowing on their rifles. But before they could fire, the child stepped forward. She touched Ethan's burned hand, and a faint blue light flowed from her skin into his. The pain faded instantly, and his wounds began to close before his eyes. The soldiers froze in disbelief. What is she?" Ethan whispered, staring at his healing hand. The girl looked up at him with tear-filled eyes and whispered, "You saved me. Now I'll save you." Before anyone could react, a burst of energy shot from her body, throwing the soldiers back. The drones exploded in the sky, and everything went silent again. Ethan stood there, shaking, holding the glowing child in his arms. The forest burned around them, the smoke rising toward the stars, and in that moment, Ethan Cole, a broken man with nothing left, realized he had just started something that could change the fate of the galaxy. When Ethan opened his eyes, everything was white. He was lying in a medical bed, wires running from his arms to humming machines. The air smelled clean and cold, too clean, like everything had been scrubbed of life. His vision blurred, but then he saw the soft outline of a small figure sitting beside his bed. It was the girl, the same alien child he had pulled from the fire. She was alive, her silver eyes watching him with a mix of fear and calm. She held a small metallic toy in her hands, spinning it slowly with her fingers. When she noticed he was awake, she smiled faintly. "You didn't die," she whispered. Ethan tried to move his hands, but couldn't. He looked down and froze. His hands were gone. In their place were metal caps connected to thin glowing wires. For a moment he couldn't breathe. The pain returned in flashes, his mind replaying the fire, the rescue, the screams. He remembered her. The light, the energy, the soldiers. He looked at her again and whispered, "Who are you?" The girl looked down. "I don't know. They called me a mistake." Before he could ask more, the door slid open. 2 uniformed officers entered, their faces hard and unfeeling. One of them, a tall woman with silver armor, spoke sharply. "Ethan Cole, you are under investigation for violation of Galactic Law 47B. Ethan frowned. "Law? What law? I saved a child from a crash." The officer's voice was cold. "You interfered with restricted biological property." "Property?" Ethan's voice cracked. "She's a child." The woman's expression didn't change. "She is not what you think. That being is classified as Alpha Specimen 01, the last of the Celian hybrids, a race exterminated over 100 years ago for genetic corruption." The words hit Ethan like ice. He looked at the girl, small, trembling, holding that toy like it was her whole world. "Her name is Lyra," he said quietly. "She doesn't have a name," the officer replied. "She's evidence." Lyra looked at the woman with fear, hiding behind Ethan's bed. "Don't take me," she whispered. "They'll hurt me again." Ethan's chest tightened. "She's just a child, can't you see that?" But the officer didn't care. "You will hand her over immediately," she said. "If you resist, we will use force." Before Ethan could reply, a doctor entered, a kind-looking man with tired eyes. He motioned the guards to wait. "Please, Commander, let me talk to him." The soldiers stepped back slightly. The doctor leaned closer to Ethan, speaking softly. "You're lucky to be alive. Your hands were completely destroyed, but the girl, she did something strange before you passed out. She touched you," the doctor continued. "And your blood, it changed. Your cells are healing at impossible speed." Ethan stared at him. "You mean she saved me?" The doctor hesitated. "In a way, yes, but whatever she is, the council will not let her live." Ethan looked at Lyra again. She was watching the window, her small hand pressed against the glass, staring at the stars. Something in her eyes, sadness mixed with something ancient, told Ethan she wasn't lying. She wasn't a weapon, she wasn't evil, she was just alone. That night, when the lights dimmed and the soldiers stood guard outside, Ethan made his choice. He couldn't move his hands, but he could think. He rewired the medical bed's control panel using his teeth and elbows. The machines began to spark quietly, disabling the door lock. Lyra turned to him, eyes wide. "You're leaving?" He nodded. "We both are." When the alarm lights began to flash, Ethan swung his body out of bed. Pain shooting through his arms, he looked at her. "Stay close to me." They slipped through the hallways, moving past empty corridors and security drones. Lyra guided him somehow, as if she could sense where danger was. Her glowing eyes flickered each time a patrol turned a corner, giving them just enough time to hide. Finally, they reached the loading bay. Outside, the night sky shimmered with blue light from the colony's energy dome. A transport ship rested nearby. Unguarded for maintenance, Ethan climbed aboard, using his bandage stumps to push levers and wires. Lyra sat beside him, holding the same spinning toy. "Where will we go?" she asked softly. Ethan looked at her, the engines humming beneath them. "As far away as we can," he said, "until I understand who you really are." As the ship lifted off, explosions echoed behind them, soldiers firing plasma rounds through the air. One blast hit the ship's wing, but Ethan managed to stabilize it. Through the smoke and flashing lights, Lyra held on to him, whispering, "They'll never stop." "Not until I'm gone," Ethan clenched his jaw. "Then they'll have to go through me first." The ship broke through the energy dome and vanished into the night sky. Below them, alarms screamed across the colony. The Galactic Council had just marked Ethan Cole as a fugitive, and somewhere deep in the stars, the truth about Lyra and why she was created waited to be found. The stars stretched endlessly before them, silent and cold. Ethan sat in the cockpit of the stolen ship, staring at the faint blue light glowing where his hands used to be. The pain had dulled, but the emptiness remained. Every time he looked at those metal stumps, he was reminded of the fire, of what he'd lost, and what he'd chosen to protect. Lyra sat behind him, wrapped in a blanket far too big for her small frame. She stared out the window, watching the stars pass like falling snow. Ethan glanced at her reflection in the glass. She looked peaceful, but he could sense the weight in her silence. She hadn't spoken much since they escaped. Finally, he broke the silence. "You can rest. Lyra, we're safe for now." She turned her head slowly, her silver eyes glimmering faintly. "Nowhere is safe for me," she said softly. "They will always find me," Ethan sighed. "Then we'll make sure they don't." He guided the ship toward a cluster of old mining asteroids. Hidden there were abandoned tunnels once used by smugglers, the perfect place to disappear. When they landed, the ship groaned, half damaged from the chase. Ethan shut down the systems and leaned back in the chair. The exhaustion finally caught up to him. He wanted to sleep for a week, but he couldn't. He had a child to protect and no hands to do it with. For days they hid inside the tunnels, surviving on emergency rations and filtered air. Ethan tried to repair the ship, using his elbows and his mouth to hold tools. He failed again and again. Metal parts slipped from his grip, wires sparked against his chest. Every failure reminded him how useless he had become. One night, frustrated, he slammed his stumps against the metal floor. "What kind of protector am I?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the empty cave. Lyra looked at him quietly, her small hands holding the toy she always carried. Then, without a word, she walked over and placed the toy in front of him. "I can fix it," she said softly. "If you help me," Ethan frowned. "Fix it? That thing?" Lyra nodded, her eyes glowing faintly. The toy unfolded. Small gears, wires, and fragments of glowing dust lifted into the air. Ethan watched in disbelief as she guided the parts using her mind. "Show me what to do," she whispered. Together, they rebuilt the toy into something else, small, but mechanical, a robotic hand shaped from scrap metal. When it was done, Lyra placed it near Ethan's arm. Blue light flowed from her fingers into the machine, and it attached itself like it was alive. Ethan gasped as he felt movement, real movement. The fingers flexed. Slow but steady, he lifted his new hand, watching the gears rotate with a faint whirring sound. "I can feel it," he whispered in shock. Lyra smiled weakly. "It listens to your heart." Ethan turned to her. "How did you do this?" Her eyes dimmed. "I don't know. Sometimes I just know things. Like they're memories that don't belong to me." That night, while Lyra slept beside the fire, Ethan stared at his new hand. Every movement felt both strange and miraculous. He could sense something, like a heartbeat running through the metal. But what frightened him most wasn't the technology. It was the way Lyra's power seemed alive, like something ancient hidden inside her days past. And Ethan used his new robotic hand to repair the ship. He scavenged other parts from the tunnels, slowly building a second one. With both hands working again, mechanical, strong, and precise, he began to feel human once more. He even smiled for the first time in months. Lyra watched him closely, her eyes following every spark and movement. "You're better now," she said. Ethan nodded. "Better, yes, but not whole." Later, as they shared a meal, Lyra suddenly spoke. "I saw your memories," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her, confused. "My memories?" She nodded. "When I healed you in the fire. I saw your wife, your home, the baby that never came." Ethan froze, his heart tightening. He hadn't spoken of his past to anyone, not even once. "How could you know that?" he asked, his voice low. Lyra's voice trembled. "I don't know, but when I closed my eyes I saw her face and she looked like me." The words struck him like lightning. He stood up slowly, staring at the child who now seemed both familiar and alien. "What are you saying, Lyra?" Tears filled her eyes. "Maybe I was made from her, maybe from you." Ethan stepped back, shaking his head. "That's not possible." But deep down, a cold truth whispered in his chest. What if it was? Outside, a faint vibration echoed through the tunnels. Ethan ran to the scanner. Red lights flickered on the screen. Ships approaching, signals encrypted. He turned to Lyra. "They found us." She stood up, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. "Then it's time you see what I really am," she said softly. The air shimmered around her, dust rising as her power began to awaken. Ethan watched in awe and fear, realizing that the child he had saved might not just be special. She might be something that could rewrite the laws of life itself. The silence of the asteroid tunnels was broken by a distant rumble. Ethan knew that sound. Engines, military grade, closing fast. They had found them. He grabbed his worn jacket, checking the scanners again. The blinking red lights filled the small room like drops of blood on a dark map. "Lyra, we have to move," he said firmly. The child stood near the cave entrance, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "I can feel them," she whispered. "They're close, too close." Ethan's robotic hands tightened around a plasma wrench. He wasn't a soldier anymore, but he still remembered how to fight this time. He wasn't fighting for orders, and he was fighting for her. They rushed toward the old mining tunnels, their boots echoing on the metal floor. Lyra guided him through the maze as if she knew every path. The lights flickered above, dust falling from the ceiling. Ethan could hear the sound of drones scanning the tunnels. Cold. Metallic voices repeating. "Target confirmed." "Capture alive," he gritted his teeth. If they caught Lyra, they would take her apart. He couldn't let that happen. They reached a dead end, a wall of collapsed rock. Ethan cursed. "No way through." Lyra looked at him calmly. "There's always a way." She closed her eyes, her small hands glowing with blue light. The rocks began to vibrate, floating slowly into the air. Ethan stepped back in shock as the path cleared before them. The air shimmered like a living wave. "Come on," she said softly, "before they see us." They entered an old shaft that led to the surface. Ethan climbed using his new mechanical arms, pulling both of them up with strength that surprised even him. When they reached the top, they saw the vast field of asteroids stretching like a frozen sea. Their stolen ship rested nearby, silent, waiting. But as they approached, the night lit up with red beams. Dozens of drones surrounded the ship. From the shadows stepped armored soldiers, galactic hunters, their helmets reflecting the cold stars. Ethan pulled Lyra behind him. "Don't move." A voice thundered through the speakers. "Ethan Cole, you are charged with treason, genetic contamination, and theft of military property." Ethan shouted back. "She's not property. She's a child." The leader raised his weapon. "She's a threat to every world under the council." Lyra clutched Ethan's arm. Trembling, "I don't want to hurt them," she whispered. Ethan's heart pounded. "Then let me handle this," but there was no more time. The soldiers opened fire, blue plasma lighting the sky. Ethan threw himself in front of Lyra. Deflecting the blasts with his metal arms, sparks flew, smoke filled the air. He fought like a machine possessed, every swing precise and furious. But they were too many. A shot hit his shoulder, sending him crashing into the dirt. Lyra screamed, a sound that wasn't human. Her eyes flared bright silver, and the world around her exploded in light. The drones stopped midair, their circuits melting. The ground shook as energy poured out from her body like a storm. Ethan shielded his eyes, watching in disbelief when the light faded. Every soldier was on the ground, alive but unconscious. The sky above glowed faintly where her power had touched it. Ethan crawled toward her. She stood motionless, her skin marked with glowing patterns like living circuits. "Lyra," he whispered, "what did you do?" Her voice trembled. "I don't know. It just happens when I'm scared." He took her in his arms, feeling her heartbeat slow. Her skin was burning hot, and then she collapsed. Ethan panicked, shaking her gently. "Stay with me, Lyra, please." Her voice was barely a whisper. "It hurts." Inside. "Something is waking up." Ethan lifted her and ran back to the ship. He started the engines with trembling hands, flying them deep into the asteroid belt. Every minute felt heavier than the last. He could still see the marks glowing faintly on her skin, like ancient symbols trying to tell him something. He sat beside her, trying to cool her fever with a damp cloth. Her small hand reached for his. "Ethan," she whispered, "I saw something. A war, a city burning, and you were there." Ethan froze. "What do you mean?" She opened her eyes weakly. "You started it." His stomach turned cold. He wanted to say she was wrong, that she was dreaming. But the fear in her voice told him otherwise. He looked out the cockpit window. The stars no longer looked peaceful. They felt like eyes watching, waiting. "Rest," he said softly. "We'll find someone who can help you." As the ship drifted deeper into the darkness, Ethan realized something terrible. The soldiers weren't trying to kill Lyra. They were trying to contain her, whatever she was. Her power was more than anyone understood. And if her visions were real, then she wasn't just the key to the past. She was the spark that could destroy the future. Ethan stared at her sleeping form and whispered to himself, "I don't care what they say, Lyra, you're not a weapon. You're a child, and I'll protect you, no matter what it costs." Outside, unseen in the shadows, a black stealth ship followed silently. Inside it, a voice spoke through a comlink. "Target located. Begin Phase 2. The ship drifted in the dark silence of space, its engines faintly glowing blue. Ethan hadn't slept in 2 days. His mind trapped between fear and questions he couldn't answer. Lyra was still unconscious, her skin covered with faint silver lines that pulsed like veins of light. Every few hours, her body shook as if something inside her was fighting to escape. He had wrapped her in a thermal blanket, whispering to her even when she couldn't hear. "It's okay, kid. You're safe. I won't let them take you." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure it was true. They were running, yes, but from what? Soldiers, the council, or something inside her that was beginning to wake up. The scanner blinked, showing a small station ahead, unregistered. Hidden among asteroid shadows, Ethan took a deep breath. Maybe someone there can help us. He guided the ship into the docking bay, the metal doors hissing shut behind them. The place was silent except for the hum of old engines and flickering lights as they stepped out. A voice echoed from the shadows. "Ethan Cole." "Still alive, I see." Ethan turned quickly, his robotic hands ready to fight. From the dim light stepped a man with gray hair, half his face replaced with metal. "Dr. Corrin," Ethan whispered, recognizing him. He had once been one of the council's leading scientists, until he vanished years ago. "What are you doing here?" Ethan asked cautiously. The old man smiled faintly. "Surviving. Like you." Corrin's eyes shifted toward the child in Ethan's arms. "And that must be her. The ghost the council wants so badly." Ethan's voice hardened. "She's sick. She needs help." Corrin gestured toward a medical table. "Lay her down. I'll see what I can do." As Corrin scanned Lyra's body with old devices, his expression changed from curiosity to shock. He whispered to himself, "It's true. They actually did it." Ethan stepped closer. "Did what?" The doctor turned the screen toward him. "This girl isn't fully alien, Ethan. She's a hybrid, part Celian, part human." Ethan frowned. "Human? That's impossible." Corrin shook his head. "Not impossible. Just forbidden." He showed Ethan a data file recovered from Lyra's cellular code. It contained fragments of DNA, human DNA, and not just any. It matched Ethan's. The room went silent. Ethan felt his chest tighten. "That's not possible." "I never—" Corrin interrupted softly. "You didn't. The council did." He pulled up more files. Holograms flickering between them. Research logs, experiments, cloning data. They used samples taken from your military medical records after the war. You were one of the few soldiers who survived the neural collapse missions. Your DNA carried rare regenerative markers. Ethan staggered back, his metallic hand clenching. "So, they made her using me?" Corrin nodded slowly. "Yes, you are her genetic source. In a way, Ethan, she is your daughter." The words shattered him like glass. He looked at Lyra lying unconscious, small and fragile. His daughter? The same child he had risked his life to save on a stranger. He sat down beside her. Speechless, memories of his lost wife flashed in his mind. Her laughter, her touch, her promise of a child they never got to have. Tears filled his eyes. "Why would they do this?" he whispered. Corrin's voice turned cold. "Because they wanted to rebuild what was lost. A weapon born from both human resilience and Celian power. But she wasn't supposed to survive. When she did, they ordered her termination. Someone smuggled her out before that could happen." Ethan looked up sharply. "Who?" Corrin hesitated. "We don't know. But whoever it was, they wanted you two to meet. This wasn't an accident, Ethan. It was destiny." Before Ethan could speak, alarms echoed through the station. A red warning light flashed across the walls. "They found us," Corrin said, panic rising in his voice. Ethan grabbed Lyra and turned toward the ship, but Corrin stopped him. Wait! Take this. He handed Ethan a small drive, glowing faintly blue. It contains the truth. Everything the council did, every experiment, every lie. If you can broadcast this, the whole galaxy will know. Ethan took it, sliding it into his wrist port. What about you? The doctor smiled sadly. I'll hold them off. It's time someone paid the price, Ethan hesitated, then nodded. He ran toward the ship, cradling Lyra in his arms. Blasts shook the walls as soldiers stormed the station. Corrin fired back with shaking hands, shouting, "Go, Ethan!" Don't look back. Ethan didn't. The ship roared to life, flames bursting from its engines as it lifted off. Through the window, he saw the station explode. Corrin gone in a flash of light. Lyra stirred weakly, whispering, "Where are we going?" Ethan looked at her, his voice breaking. "To tell the truth," he said, "and to make them pay for what they did to you." As the ship vanished into hyperspace, Ethan looked down at his metal hands. The same hands that once failed to save his real family, now sworn to protect the one created from their memory. He didn't know if he could stop the council, but for the first time in years he knew exactly what he had to fight for. The galaxy was no longer quiet. Every star seemed to burn with tension after Dr. Corrin's death. Ethan Cole and Lyra became the most wanted fugitives in known space. The Galactic Council broadcast their faces across every system, calling them traitors, terrorists, and destroyers of peace. But peace built on lies never lasts. Inside a small abandoned freighter orbiting a forgotten moon, Ethan prepared for war. His metal hands moved with steady purpose as he rebuilt what the Council had once taken from him. Wires, circuits, and fragments of alien tech scattered across the table. Each piece he attached hummed with power, silent proof that pain could become strength. Lyra sat nearby, her face pale, the glowing symbols on her skin dimming and brightening like the rhythm of a heartbeat. "Ethan," she said softly, "why do they call us dangerous?" He looked up from his work, his eyes tired but calm. "Because truth is dangerous, Lyra, especially when people in power live on lies." She tilted her head, trying to understand. "But I didn't hurt anyone. I just wanted to live." Ethan smiled weakly. "And that's exactly why they fear you." He stood, his new hands gleaming silver and black, then stronger, sharper, more advanced than before. He had used Corrin's research to upgrade his limbs, fusing them with alien alloys and old military tech. He flexed his fingers, feeling the faint hum of energy running through them. Now he wasn't just a mechanic, he was a weapon outside. Old resistance channels flickered to life. Messages came from smugglers, miners, and even soldiers tired of obeying the Council's cruelty. The truth Ethan carried, the data Corrin had given him, had begun to spread in whispers. And whispers were how revolutions were born. He patched through a signal to one of the pirate frequencies. "This is Ethan Cole. I have proof the Council created living weapons using human and alien DNA. They lied to every world under their rule. They burned entire species to hide what they did. But we can stop them, together." The response came after a long silence. "We thought you were dead," a rough voice said. "Not yet," Ethan replied. "But they will be, if we stand together." Lyra watched him from the corner, her eyes reflecting both pride and fear. "You're different now," she said, stronger, but sadder. Ethan kneeled beside her, placing a metallic hand over hers. "Sometimes strength comes from sadness, kid," he said quietly. "It reminds us what we're fighting for." Suddenly, the alarms blared. Lyra jumped. "They found us again!" Ethan looked at the radar, a fleet of Council ships closing in. No time to run. He grabbed his rifle, motioned for her to stay behind cover. "Not this time," he said. "We fight." The first blast hit the hull, shaking the ship violently. Ethan ran to the control room, firing up the engines and activating the defense turrets. Flashes of light lit the dark sky outside. The sound of explosions echoed like thunder. He fired back, using every system he could control with his new hands. The turrets tore through the enemy drones, one after another, but more kept coming. "Ethan, there are too many," Lyra cried. He gritted his teeth. "Then we make them remember us." A plasma beam ripped through the side of their ship, throwing him against the wall. Smoke filled the air, alarms screamed. Lyra stumbled toward him, her eyes glowing wildly. "I can stop them," she shouted. Ethan grabbed her arm. "No, you'll burn yourself out." But she shook her head. "If I don't, we die." Before he could stop her, Lyra stepped forward, her small body trembling. Her eyes turned pure white, the glowing symbols across her skin flaring like fire. Outside the ship, the stars themselves seemed to shiver. Energy exploded from her, a pulse of silver light expanding across the void. Every enemy ship froze mid-air, systems shutting down, engines failed, weapons turned to dust. Ethan watched in awe as the entire fleet drifted helplessly. But Lyra collapsed, her light fading. He caught her before she hit the floor. Her breathing was weak, her skin pale. "Lyra, stay with me," Ethan shouted. She opened her eyes slightly, tears slipping down her cheek. "I saw everything. They're coming for all of us, Ethan. Not just me. They'll destroy anyone who knows." Ethan's voice broke. "Then I'll stop them. I swear I will." She reached up, touching his face with trembling fingers. "You already did once," she whispered. "You saved me. You gave me life." Her hand fell, her body limp. Ethan's heart cracked open. He screamed in a raw, painful sound that echoed through the broken ship. And then something inside him changed. The circuits in his arms flared red. His mechanical eyes glowed bright. Through the storm of pain, he heard her last words echo in his mind. "You're not fighting for revenge. You're fighting for hope." He stood slowly, setting her gently on the floor. Then he turned to the control panel and sent a final encrypted broadcast to every free system in the galaxy. "This is Ethan Cole," his voice said through static. "Calm but fierce. They made monsters out of us. Now we'll show them what real humans can do." Outside, across countless worlds, the message spread like wildfire. From slave camps to rebel fleets, people began to rise. For the first time in years, the galaxy dared to dream of freedom again. And deep in the Council's headquarters, the Supreme Commander watched the broadcast with cold fury. "Prepare the Omega Protocol," she ordered. "If Ethan Cole wants a war, we'll give him one." The war had begun. Every corner of the galaxy was burning. Cities once filled with light now floated in silence, their skies full of broken ships and drifting wreckage. The Galactic Council's fleets clashed with rebel forces on every front. And at the center of it all, one man carried the weight of the truth. Ethan Cole, the mechanic who had once fixed machines, now led a revolution. His name had become a legend, whispered by rebels, feared by commanders. To some he was a savior, to others a traitor. But to him he was just a man trying to keep a promise. Inside the old freighter, Ethan stood before the viewport, watching the chaos of distant battles. His metallic hands gleamed under the flickering lights. Beside him lay Lyra, motionless but alive, floating in a healing chamber built from alien tech. Her faint heartbeat pulsed with a soft silver glow. She had not woken since the day she unleashed her power. Ethan spoke quietly, his voice heavy with pain. "I told you I'd keep you safe, kid. But maybe I was the one who needed saving." He turned as a transmission came through. "Commander Cole," said a rebel officer, "we've located the Council's main fortress in the Arc Spire. It's now or never." Ethan stared at the screen. The Arc Spire, the heart of the Galactic Council, built above a dying star. He clenched his fists, the gears in his arms humming. "Prepare every ship," he said. "We end this tonight." The rebel fleet moved like a storm through the void. Thousands of ships in a small, broken, desperate, united under one cause as they approached the Arc Spire. The stars dimmed under the glow of the Council's defenses. Hundreds of massive dreadnoughts blocked their path. Ethan stood in the command bridge, his voice steady.
"Today isn't about revenge," he said over the comms. "It's about truth."
"They built their empire on fear. We'll tear it down with hope." And with that, the battle began. Explosions ripped through space, light and shadow mixing into chaos. Ethan's ship led the charge, weaving between enemy fire. His upgraded hands controlled the systems faster than any human could. Missiles streaked past, plasma shields flared. Rebel pilots shouted over comms, "For freedom! For Lyra!" But even as they fought bravely, the Council's defenses were overwhelming. One by one, ships vanished in bursts of fire. Ethan knew brute force wouldn't win this. He opened the encrypted drive Koran had given him. Inside it was the key, blueprints of the Arc Spire's energy core, connected to the star below it. If he could overload it, the entire Council network would collapse. But it meant flying straight into the spire. And no one who did that would come back. He looked one last time at Lyra's sleeping form. Her light flickered faintly through the glass chamber. "Rest, my girl," he whispered. "I'll finish what we started." He set the ship on autopilot toward the spire. Enemy ships swarmed, but he didn't stop. Every laser that hit only pushed him forward. Inside the spire, alarm screamed. The Supreme Commander stood at the central platform. "Ethan Cole," she said coldly over the speakers. "You can't stop evolution. You are just a broken man playing God." Ethan's voice came through the static, steady and calm. "I'm not a god. I'm a father." He crashed through the docking gates, metal and flame flying everywhere. Inside, soldiers surrounded him, but his cybernetic arms moved like lightning. He fought his way through the corridors, his body burning, his heart unyielding. Finally, he reached the reactor chamber, a swirling sphere of light drawn from the dying star below. He plugged the data drive into the core console. The system screamed in protest, warning of overload. "Warning! Core collapse imminent!" echoed through the station. As he worked, he heard a voice behind him. Soft, familiar. "Ethan." He turned to Lyra, standing weakly in the doorway, her eyes glowing again. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His voice breaking, she smiled faintly. "You shouldn't either." She walked toward him, her small hand touching the control panel. "I can stabilize it long enough for you to escape." Ethan shook his head. "No, Lyra, you're not dying here." She looked up at him, tears in her silver eyes. "I already did, the moment they made me. But you gave me life again. Let me give it back." Before he could stop her, she pressed her hands to the core. Light exploded around them, waves of energy rippling through the spire. Her body began to glow, turning almost transparent. "Lyra!" Ethan shouted, running to her. She smiled through the blinding light. "Don't be sad." "Ethan, you'll see me in every star." The core collapsed, and the spire began to fall into the star below. Ethan's systems failed, his vision flickering. He crawled to her, their hands touching, metal to light. Her voice echoed softly. "You gave me life twice, once in blood, once in love. Then the light consumed everything. When the dust settled, the Arcspire was gone. The Council had fallen, their control shattered. Across the galaxy, the slaves were free, the silence of tyranny broken among the stars. People whispered of a man who sacrificed his hands to save a child, and in doing so, saved them all. And somewhere far beyond the reach of worlds, a faint silver light drifted across the sky, like a child's laughter carried by the wind. Ethan Cole's legend lived on, a reminder that even in the darkest parts of the universe, one act of love can become the last light that never fades.